A while ago, someone shared one of my videos with the words, "This is informative, my selective mutism is a lot more severe than OP's though," and went on to describe their experiences. When I read this, my first thought was, hello, I have experienced all the things you described as well, how can you claim yours is worse than mine? But then I rewatched my video and realized, well, if you haven't known me all my life, there is no way you can know my selective mutism used to be so much more severe than it is described in my videos, which show how I feel now and have been the past few years. I also understand the person didn't mean to say, well, I have the worst, so shut up. But hello friends, look at this video to get insight on selective mutism and my personal experience with this is. So it's all good, there's no bad blood. But this inspired me to make another video telling my selective mutism story to show other selective mutes, hey, this is how it used to be for me and this is how it is now. It can get better, it doesn't have to be this way forever. I guess this is going to be similar to a video I made in 2018, but a little more detailed and more for other patients to relate rather than educating on the disorder. Just one more note before we start. I have other mental disorders too, and through the years there were always other things going on that had an impact on my general mental state. I understand more background info would be helpful to understand my selective mutism story and may be interesting to read and relate, but some stuff is just too personal even for a video like this, so please respect that I'm not going to expose my life in the story in detail. Apparently I came into this world and was already the quiet type. Quite unusual for a newborn baby. I didn't start screaming. I guess my birth gave my parents a taste of what was about to come, but they wouldn't know about that for another few years. Then it took me some time to start speaking. I don't know the exact age, just that it was not so late that it was worrisome, just a bit later than the average. And when I did, I mostly skipped that cute baby language with funnily pronounced words and stuff. My dad once described this to me as, it's like you carefully observed how our language works and then spoke when you thought, yep, I know how to do this now. Now, this wasn't selective mutism yet, but I think it's interesting that I've been unusual when it comes to speaking since the very beginning. As far as I remember, in kindergarten, meaning ages 3 to 6, I was rather quiet child too, but I don't think I really had anxiety there. I talked to and played with other kids when I wanted to, but preferred to play by myself or a really small group, meaning 3 kids maximum, including me. In the mornings we were expected to assemble and sit in a circle to talk about important things, and I remember I often tried to skip those, but again, not really because I was scared of talking at a big group, because I did talk there when I had something important to bring up, but really just because I found it boring and annoying and I rather wanted to do things I like better instead. With the start of elementary school, age 6, the problem started. I wouldn't put my hand up in class, would only talk very quietly and only when I was directly asked. I could speak to a couple kids in the breaks and sometimes played with them, again in a group of 2 through 3 people max, sorry. But just like in kindergarten, I was completely satisfied when I was spending time alone with a game, a book, my sketchblock, or really just my imagination. My teachers thought I was excluded and lonely and got other kids to try to include me in their games, and I tried, but playing in groups with others was just not really my thing. I did invite 1 to 2 friends over and went to their houses too after school regularly too, but larger friend groups than that were at once no thanks. Now, how I behaved in the breaks was my choice, and this was just the way I was and still mostly am, but the problem remained that I couldn't really talk in class, sometimes not even look up from my desk. Sometime in elementary I must have mostly stopped talking to relatives, except parents and siblings too, which I think I could previously do. I'm not sure when that happened, but it must have developed over an extended time anyway, not from, hello grandpa, I need to show you this rock I just found and include you in the game I just made up, to, in one day. I'm not sure, but I think first and second grade, ages 6 to 8, were still easier than third and fourth grade, ages 8 to 10. I remember that in first or second grade I recited a poem in front of students and their parents at a Christmas party my class hosted. This was somehow possible back then. And then there's a picture of me at my first communion at age 9. You can tell I was already uncomfortable and anxious, especially around adults, but I'm not sure if you can say I already had selective mutism there, or if it was just strong shyness or social anxiety. The same day, my family surprised me with an unexpected gift. A family we knew had horses, and they arranged I could ride on one of their ponies that day. Now, I loved horses and I loved riding when I got a chance, but between all these people, many of my relatives, plus the family that owned the pony, I was really anxious and uncomfortable and couldn't really talk. Now, while it became obvious in elementary school that I had some problems, which wasn't in the last 2 years of it, which was also, I think, when I tried counseling for the first time, but I'm not sure. It became even worse in 5th grade, secondary school, age 10. We were expected to be big kids now. We're no longer elementary school kids. Time to grow up. No time for kids who can't do anything on their own. You better learn it now. It was no longer mostly tolerated how I was. I think it's safe to say that now, in 5th grade, 10 years old, I had selective mutism. Not just shyness, not just social anxiety. I still couldn't put my hand up in class, but now most of the time also couldn't talk in class when I was directly asked. I could barely talk to classmates either, now not even the ones I knew from elementary school still. It bothered me as well. I really wanted to speak, but I could not get myself to do it. I described how I feel in these situations in another video, and I'm just going to use the relevant frame from that one here and also read it to you. So, my head feels like something inside my brain is buzzing loudly, pressing to my skull. My tongue and lips feel literally too heavy to move them. My throat feels like there's some kind of lock in it that doesn't let anything in or out. My chest feels like something super heavy is pressing on it from outside. My stomach feels like I'm going to be sick. My arms and legs feel like something inside them is buzzing too, and they feel super heavy too. And all of that builds up more and more with every second that I don't open my mouth to speak. Also, the thing where I prefer to be by myself rather than being in a group was suddenly not respected as just the way some people just are, but something to make fun of, apparently. Outside of school, I could talk to my friends and close family, but not really anyone else anymore. And if someone I could not talk to was in the same room, I could not even talk to my family and friends. Not even whisper, not write anything down or try to sign anything with my hands either. It must have been especially strange for my parents to see their child go from toddler who wants to order their own ice cream and gets up on the train to loudly inform everyone else where their family is going today, to a child that shuts down completely in social situations and wouldn't be able to communicate if their life depended on it. Mind you, while I was speaking perfectly normal at home. In 7th grade, age 12, it was as bad, if not worse. At that age, I started using social media and instant messengers, and while online I talked, meaning I wrote, like I did around close family and friends, which was obviously confusing for classmates and teachers. Like, does that kid that doesn't talk only not talk to us but to everyone else? Or if they are so open and communicative, why don't they talk to us like that at school? Do they not like us? Do they think they're better than us? The problem was I couldn't really explain it either. I didn't know what selective mutism was, how it worked, that I had it. I just knew that sometimes, even though I knew what I wanted to say and really wanted to say it, the words just wouldn't come out. And how do you explain this to someone else if you don't understand it yourself? Outside of school, I went through different phases of being able to talk or not. I remember phases where I could sometimes talk to strangers if a family member or friend was with me. Other phases where I could only talk to a stranger if no one I knew was within hearing range. phases where none of that was possible, phases where I would shut down while talking to family or friends in public if anyone could overhear the conversation, and probably more I can't think of right now. But unfortunately, it seems impossible to bring these in a correct chronological order. I just can't remember it all that clearly. I was bullied at school for being this way and other things, but that's not the point here. And even when I could speak, I got not only the famous, "Oh my god, it speaks," but people also made fun of the way my voice sounds like what, which obviously made me even more afraid to talk. My voice is objectively weird, too deep for a girl or woman, but not quite as you'd expect it from a boy or man either. It has an odd sound, I know. And everyone is allowed to have their own opinion on the way my voice sounds. What gives anyone the right to make fun of it? Something I clearly cannot choose and cannot change. I did not find your face very pleasant to look at either, but I figured that's just entirely my own problem and not something you really need to know. Around that age I considered inpatient therapy, but didn't go through with it. I was afraid to leave home for so long all on my own. Was afraid of what people would think if they knew where I'd go, and also genuinely thought I could get better on my own too, which obviously didn't work. In 8th grade, age 14, I transferred to a different school. I thought maybe in a new environment where people didn't know me yet, I would have the chance to become a different person. Maybe if I tried hard enough, I could change, I could start over, without a picture that everyone already had of me. But selective mutism doesn't work that way. You can't turn it off, you can't just pretend you don't have it, as in fake it till you make it. You can't suppress it if you just try hard enough. I had, however, made small progress at that point. I could talk more in comparison, but, well, to people who just met me, I was still super quiet and weird. I could talk a bit to the girls in the new class, the boys, not really. The girls actually tried really hard to include the new one, and I tried to fit in to not be the freak this time, but I couldn't change how I was. I couldn't talk to them much and couldn't really fit in. A few weeks after I started going to that school, 2 girls from a different class approached me, and we found out we liked the same bands that were generally not very well liked at our school. So we had something in common, and even though I could hardly talk to them either, they kept trying, kept inviting me to hang out with them in the breaks, even if I spent the entire time saying 2 words at most. And that's the story of how I met my best friend of 11 years. I'm not sure why it worked with them, why I could, after months, talk to them, but not to the other girls. Now I was the outsider in my class once again, but now I at least had a tiny friend group at school that I hung out with and talked to. I could also more easily talk to strangers like cashiers, waiters, bus drivers. I mean, it wasn't easy, but easier than conversations you can't previously script in your head. But classmates, teachers, distant relatives, anyone except parents and siblings, still difficult. I could talk more to them than I previously did, but it was, in comparison to normal people, still not very much. And phone calls were pretty much impossible. At 14 I had my first little job. I was a newspaper delivery girl, and part of my job was to collect the money from the subscribers directly from them in cash to then transfer it to the publisher's bank account, which is maybe an odd concept, and they got rid of it later too, but I can imagine it was convenient, especially for elderly subscribers, as they wouldn't have to go to the bank. I have no idea how I managed to do that, to be honest, but I did. I could do all that, but I could not read my sick grandmother a story. I remember a moment where I was visiting my grandma, who at this point couldn't speak, could barely move, was hardly reacting to me at all. I wasn't sure how much of her environment she could comprehend still, but I thought it was worth a try to read to her, to at least give her a feeling of someone's here and interacts with me, even if she possibly wouldn't be able to understand and follow the story. But it didn't work. I sat down. No one besides us was in the room, and there was clearly no way she would ridicule me for the way I talked and read. I mean, not that she would have done that before, but no, it was physically impossible. There was no way she'd ask things I didn't want to answer or anything, so I really had no reason to be afraid. But the words didn't come out. I stared at the book and tried to make myself read these words out loud, but nothing came out. I think this story is a good example of how selective mutism sometimes doesn't make sense, and how you don't have to be afraid to talk here. Nothing can happen. Unfortunately, it doesn't help much. I know I have nothing to fear. I know nothing negative will happen if I speak, but the disorder doesn't let me anyway. In 9th grade, age 15, I had my second job, this time as an intern, in a library, and I remember the job interview for that one, how I confidently spoke to this person and looked them in the eyes. I remembered it so well for years because I was never again able to pretend to be so confident at an interview. At the job, I could talk to my boss, to customers. I somehow managed to do all that. I have no idea how. Just phone calls were still impossible. And it would never really be that way again. Back in school, it was back to normal. I couldn't talk in class, could hardly talk to teachers, found it difficult to talk to classmates, especially in group projects. Could especially not address someone if they were not facing me, if I couldn't meet their eyes with mine first. Was the worst at presentations. I mean, I was the kid who recited a long poem in front of a classroom full of kids and their parents, remember? And desperately wanted to change all that and couldn't. Also at age 15, my best friend and I started going to a small monthly convention to try and find more people with the same uncommon interests. And I really wanted to try once again to fit in somewhere. If it wasn't at school, maybe I could find a group outside of school where I didn't feel like an alien. But I never got 100% comfortable there either, and I stopped going when I was 18. I could talk there a bit, but really only if someone directly asked me something. I had many, hey, I want to speak and I know what I want to say, but it doesn't work moments there too. It's almost like you can't turn that off if it's inconveniencing you. And even if nice people kept trying to include me, it felt uncomfortable most of the time to be around that many people for an extended time. Here's a picture of me at a party with people I didn't know well when I was 15. And then this is me later the same night, only around two good friends. And I think this says a lot. Unlike me. By 10th grade, meaning age 15 and 16, I think I had made small progress when it came to talking in class, but honestly, once people have a certain view of you, they don't really see the small changes. I remember a situation where I had to read out loud to the class. The fact that this was even possible in comparison to 7th grade. I had already started to read when my teacher interrupted me to say, "Please, loud enough," when I was in fact not muttering quietly. And that's not just my opinion, another student actually pointed out she was speaking loud enough. And this is just one example of the whole people don't see your small progress because they already see you a certain set way thing. Around the beginning of 10th grade, I started seeing a speech therapist. I previously had tried counseling sometime in elementary school, I'm not sure when, and psychotherapy probably 8th grade, but that hadn't seemed right. The psychotherapist had said there was nothing really wrong, I just have to get out more, socialize more, which I kind of started doing the next year, but as I already described, this didn't really make things better. Anyway, I hadn't had a diagnosis yet. Around the same time I started seeing a speech therapist, I went to rock concerts with close friends, where I could, weirdly enough, sing and scream, and I had, for the first time, talked to the support act after the show in English, my second language, got pictured with them, and somehow all of that was possible, but speaking at school and to distant relatives was not. Well, the speech therapist became ill and unable to work in the long run, so I got referred to one of her colleagues who I could talk to even less than the first one. After seeing them for a couple months, I, now 16 years old, got the diagnosis Selective Mutism. And the therapy ended without much success, as they felt they had tried everything and it all didn't work with me. They also recommended I should try ergotherapy, but I wouldn't pick that up for another year because I didn't feel like, oh, okay, so that's what I have. Now it has a name and I can find a community for support, and I understand they were not the right therapist for me right now, as something else is better suited for me. But more like, well, just another person that eventually gave up on me, one more person proving I'm a hopeless case. And also, well, maybe it's your fault I didn't respond to your treatment. Maybe it's just shit. Maybe it isn't me. Maybe I don't need that other therapy because I'm not the fucking problem. Well, like I said in the very beginning of this video, I had and have other disorders going on in life circumstances. And teenage hormones probably did their part too. I guess this is just one of many situations that would make more sense with more background info, but some things are not for everyone to know. So, summer came and passed, and I had graduated from that school and started 11th grade at another one. Quick note, if you're from a country with an entirely different school system and want to know why I had to go to another school for that, you can pause the video here and look at the graphic I made to explain this. I will link to that in the description box. Or keep watching and check the graphic out later. Or don't. This is optional for those who might find it interesting to read about how school works in other countries. If you want to skip that part, that's okay. All you need to know really is I wanted to get a higher degree that my school didn't offer. I thought, once again, starting all over where teachers and students don't know me yet and don't have a certain view of me, and with the progress I made, would be my chance to become a different person. This time it worked to an extent. I try to socialize and be someone who talks to their classmates. But again, you can't turn social anxiety and selective mutism off. So while I could sometimes put my hand up in class and had anxiety every second of it, and sometimes asked teachers for help when I had a problem, I didn't really make friends when everyone else did. Two people in my class who had known each other before but knew no one else really, who were also not really part of any group, approached me, a fellow outsider, I guess, and we sort of became friends. Not really close friends, we wouldn't see each other outside of school or share our deepest secrets, but we hung out in the breaks, sometimes talked online, sent each other funny stuff on social media, and all that stuff. However, talking to one of them, a girl, was for some reason more difficult and anxiety-inducing than talking to the other one, a boy. I don't know why, especially because my experience had usually been the other way around. After a while, the girl found other friends anyway, and it was just the guy and I from then on. Anyway, my general performance in school was better now. Sure, I was quiet, but I had good grades, was hardworking, gave good presentations, speaking loud and clear. I mean, can you believe? Was reliable, except in group projects, of course. I'm sure all selective mutes watching will know exactly what I mean. We did so many group projects, much more than my previous schools. And the best part was, my teacher would always draw lots when it came to presenting the work to the class, so you would never know whether it's you or someone else this time. Which is admittedly a good way to make sure every member of the group knows a lot about the work, instead of having one person that did everything, two people who only talk to each other about something completely irrelevant, and one person who was asleep the whole time. But it meant for me I was full of anxiety at all times. But even just working in groups before the presentation was hell. I just couldn't get my mouth to open to discuss things with my group, to ask questions, to present my ideas. Sometimes my whole body would just freeze and I couldn't even do anything with my hands. which of course looked like I just didn't want to do anything and just let everyone else do the work, because hello, if I was really actually so shy, then why could I magically do the presentation in front of the class, and why could I talk in group projects if the group consisted of only my true friends and I? Come on, I can't be that shy, I'm just lazy in the bitch. Well, I already explained I don't really know why I found it easier to talk to certain people than to others. Why I could suddenly do presentations, well, the truth is, I have no idea. Looking back, I think it's like I put on a whole different face and played a role. I feel like that's what I do today as well sometimes when I'm in social situations, especially around people I won't see again. But it has never been a conscious decision to go, alright, today I'm playing a person that confidently does presentations, or today in a city I'm acting like someone who does small talk and jokes with the cashier. It just kinda happens that I find myself acting like I usually wouldn't. I guess that's one way to cope with it. I'm just not sure it's a good one. I have no idea what my personality is actually like. Anyway, back to school life in 11th and 12th grade. The type of school I went to required many internships during the holidays and during school time, and oh boy, I don't know how I did it so seemingly confident in 9th grade, because not even 2 years later it was so bad. I was in retail and office jobs, and no matter where I was, I couldn't talk to customers and clients, couldn't answer the phone or make phone calls, could barely speak to my coworkers or ask questions when I didn't understand something. I'm surprised I even got these jobs and wasn't fired all the time. But I was, rightfully so, criticized for all that a lot. I mean, yeah, I know I was bad at all this, but I still couldn't change it on my own. So I finally picked up ergotherapy at age 17. But admittedly it was less of, I think this could really help me, I feel like I could get better, but more of, well, okay, if that's what people expect me to do. Not much of a surprise, but it would take me a long time until I could talk to the new therapist. The fact that it at some point became even possible to properly talk to them was a good sign, I guess, and with this person, the whole therapy thing did indeed work better than with people I'd previously been to. But obviously this couldn't magically cure me either. Back in school, I was at least doing a little bit better, and I somehow managed to graduate with a somewhat good degree at age 18. Which was probably partly because my finals were all in written form. I didn't have to do any oral exams. Woo! Not because I had selective mutism, I was just lucky. Some of us had to do them if we stood between two grades. My grades were clear enough. I could have asked to do oral exams additionally voluntarily too, but obviously I decided not to do that. No. After graduation, I had about a month of free time until another internship would start. I remember in that month I met up with 2 different people I knew from the internet, and it couldn't have been more different, really. Friend 1 I had met in real life for the first time, and I was so bad at talking to them, even though we knew so much about each other, had stayed up all night chatting, had exchanged recorded video messages, but in real life it was kinda, I don't know, I could talk, but really almost only if they directly asked me something, and then I gave only short replies. The other friend I had met in real life a couple times before. We were close, but not as close as I thought I was with friend 1. Anyway, I visited friend 2 at their home, stayed overnight, could even talk to their family and their other friends instantly. I felt really comfortable there. It was like I had always been a part of that family and friend group. I think this was one of the very few times where I instantly felt completely comfortable in someone else's environment. And guess which person I'm still friends with nowadays. Weirdly enough, it's friend 1. We have since seen each other again after nearly 5 years had passed between our first and our second meeting. The second time it was so different. We were just hanging out and just talking like it had never been any other way. So, spoiler, things have, regarding selective mutism, gotten better for me a little bit. And about friend 2, well, there wasn't one big thing that ended the friendship, no drama. Sometimes You just drift apart when your lives change. And sometimes you can't really revive the friendship you once had. We don't really speak to each other now, but the memories we made have a special place in my heart still today. Well, anyway, back to the month after graduation. Now, I was really unsure how or even if I should describe the time from then on, because people from my real life might watch this as well, especially people who haven't seen me since around graduation, and I think I'd feel embarrassed if they knew everything. Then again, I'm in full control of what I want to share and how much of it I want to share. So for now, all I want to say is, due to life circumstances and, well, more mental health issues than just selective mutism, I wasn't able to do the internship. I had to find another one though, because I wouldn't get my full degree without a certain amount of internship time. Spoiler, I got it, but we'll get to that later. Around that time I was looking into psychotherapy again, and when I found a psychotherapist, I got the diagnosis social anxiety disorder, around 2 years after the selective mutism one, which is not very surprising, as almost all patients with selective mutism also have social anxiety. But I didn't know that yet, nor did I even know social anxiety disorder was a thing until around that time. Yeah, funny story, I went to that therapist a couple times, not knowing about social anxiety disorder, then read online this existed, thought, that sounds familiar, had my next appointment, and before I could even give them any new information, they greeted me with, so I made the diagnosis. And yeah. I could talk to that person a bit sometimes not at all. I saw that therapist for almost a year. In hindsight, I can say I should have left much earlier. It wasn't doing any good for me. In fact, it probably made things worse in the long run. But it was my first long-term psychotherapy, and I didn't know didn't have to be this way. As I mentioned, I have and had other problems going on, but they disregarded everything but social anxiety. Even when I had urgent problems, they were basically ignored and pushed aside, because let's talk about my anxiety instead. After almost a year, I left with basically no progress. In the meantime, I had turned 19, started and somehow completed my other internship. Even though it was horrible, I was horribly bad at everything because of my selective mutism and all the other stuff. I'm keeping a mysterious secret in this video. Tried to go back to school for 1 more year for a higher degree. Couldn't do that because, you know, all that mystery stuff. Got scolded for that by the therapist, because how am I supposed to help you with your anxiety when you just avoid situations that give you anxiety, even though I explained anxiety wasn't even the biggest factor in this. Oh, and after they had previously said that my mental health comes first, then comes work and school, I can still do all that later while I was still doing the internship. At the end of the year, I started seeing a counselor for something else and went on medication for the first time. Both things my therapist wasn't a fan of, and shortly before I turned 20, my therapist announced they were moving and reopening their office in another city. We agreed I would contact them in January at their new office to work out a new weekly appointment, and when I didn't do that, I never heard from them again either. So I guess their clients weren't that important to them after all. Or what? So almost a year of therapy was not really completed. It was pretty much interrupted and never picked up again. With the counselor, the focus was on something else, and as social anxiety and selective mutism were not their specialized field, they never really understood why I couldn't talk to them and only communicated through writing. They always insisted my muteness was because of certain events and circumstances, and I insisted no, I was already selectively mute before all that. Anyway, I communicated with them through writing things down, handing the paper to them. They would reply verbally, and I would reply by writing. This worked for a couple months, and at some point I wasn't able to do that anymore either. my hands and body would just freeze along with my mouth, which was probably a big part of why after 1.5 years, now age 21, the counseling would end too without much success. But about a year before that would happen, I tried to see a specialist for selective mutism again, being 20, and that went bad. Well, they seem to be a big fan of that selectively mute kids enjoy the power they have over their family narrative, which I have ranted about more than enough in the past. They were pretty strict when it came to using alternatives to speaking. Their rule was basically that none of that was allowed. You didn't get to write. I was still going to the counselor that let me write at that point, remember? And that was, not surprising, heavily criticized by this specialist. You didn't get to use your hands or nodding, shaking your head and all that. You spoke or they didn't react. I mean, confrontation is the way to go with anxieties and phobias, but so I understand where it's coming from, but I think this way might be a bit too radical for the beginning. I don't know. But what actually bothered me a lot more was that they straight up didn't believe me when I filled out a questionnaire about my experiences with selective mutism. I checked that I could, for example, do grocery shopping on my own, and they were like, no, everyone can go into a store, put things in a cart, pay and leave. The question is, can you order things and talk to cashiers? And let me just quickly throw in, actually, there were times where I couldn't even do what they refer to as everyone can do that, so being able to do just that would have been a success in comparison to earlier years as well, but okay. I explained, no, I understood it the right way then, and I rightfully checked that I can do grocery shopping, including ordering things and talking to staff with a lot of anxiety, but I could. And they insisted I was just trying to present myself better than I actually was, because I was, I don't know, too embarrassed or too proud to admit what I couldn't do. Yikes. Well, also the part where I was even able to tell them this verbally was a huge success, but, well, to be fair, they couldn't have known that as they hadn't seen me the years before. They also insisted I had to feel so isolated and lonely, even if I said I wasn't. And they told me about a case of a young girl with selective mutism, super isolated, little to no friends, lonely and depressed. But after she successfully completed her therapy at this office, she became a whole different person. She now has a big group of friends who she regularly goes out with. She loves to go to parties, to discos, has zero anxiety there, and loves her new life. I mean, if that is a real story that happened that way, that's great for the girl, really. But it's not really relatable for me. The specialist said this could be me as well, but around that time I had finally started to accept that I'm a person that doesn't need much social interaction to be happy. Someone whose inner battery drains when I'm around many people for a long time and recharges when I'm alone with a book and maybe a cat to pet. And that hasn't changed. This doesn't mean I never go out at all, it just means I don't hang out with many people at once. I prefer to meet up with one person, maybe two people, and do stuff with just them instead of a whole group of people. Not just at home too, we go out shopping, to see movies, concerts too. And yes, there is other people around us there too, but you don't have to interact with them much. And I enjoy these times, but afterwards I still need some time to rest and recharge my battery. That's just the way it was then, and that's how it is still today. I guess I've always been like that. I mentioned I tried all that fitting into big groups and going out thing, but I guess if that's not the way you are, you can't really change that. I tried to tell them that, but again, they thought I was just trying to make myself look better, because if I have selective mutism, it must look exactly like a certain specialist pictures it. It's impossible that I may have already improved and truthfully say what I can do and what I cannot do. I must be lying, apparently. Well, considering that I had nearly a year of unsuccessful therapy with a therapist that disregarded my problems and all that stuff behind me, and all that had only ended a couple months ago, I thought, No, not again, and did not start a therapy with that specialist. Then I had many appointments with potential new psychotherapists in the following months, because by now you can all say it with me, I have other stuff besides selective mutism going on. But it basically always went like this. Hi, I'm emailing you because I have this and that, and I want to start therapy again. Okay, call me and we'll work out an appointment. I can't call you. I have a thing called selective mutism, but I can ask my mom to call you. Yeah, it's okay, I have experience with very shy and quiet patients. Well, I can't help you if you can't answer my questions. I didn't know you weren't going to talk at all. I have no experience with this, actually. Since the counseling ended as well when I was 21, I've only had ergotherapy. I haven't been to first interviews with psychotherapists in a while too, because as you can imagine, my experience has been really frustrating. And additionally, living in a rural area, there's a quite limited number of psychotherapists to begin with. I'm sorry if this sounds discouraging, but that's just my real life experience. And I think there's no point in lying and saying you will immediately find a good therapist and that will fix it all, to try to give people hope when that isn't how it's going to be. Obviously, I do hope you will have a better experience than I did, though. Well, I must have been around 21 too when I started talking to other selective mutes online and started researching the disorder, 5 years after my diagnosis. Unfortunately, I don't remember exactly when and how that started, but I can tell it was around that time because I was already planning a video about selective mutism when I was 21, but then didn't really make and publish one until I was 22, approaching 23. I don't really know what to say about the past years between 21 and 22 and now being 25. It's been an up and down journey, generally going up in comparison to, let's say, the ages 10 to 14, but it isn't a linear way, and I have many days too where I'm not able to speak in social situations when I could do it before. I am not cured from selective mutism and social anxiety. I'm just managing it better most of the time, sometimes not. Sometimes I can talk like a normal person to distant relatives, sometimes not at all. Sometimes just a hello and bye, which is not much, but still more than how it used to be when I was much younger. I can do the talking at my doctor's appointment myself, mostly. Sometimes I still write down stuff too, but have a hard time making these appointments over the phone. It shouldn't be so hard, as you can really mostly script a conversation like that in your head beforehand. They most likely won't say something you couldn't have expected at all and catches you off guard. And yet, talking on the phone is still my biggest enemy. I'm able to make phone calls from time to time with a racing heart and sweaty shaking hands. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes I tell long stories at ergotherapy. Sometimes my mouth gets dry as I try to ask for a tissue and just can't get my mouth to open. I'm a newspaper delivery person once again, have been for nearly 3 years now, and I have to do a lot of small talk with people on my route. Sometimes that works almost easily. Sometimes I pray no one will be on the street that day. Sometimes I seemingly confidently order my own food at restaurants. Sometimes my family and friends still have to do it for me. When I do order it myself, the waiters can understand me now at least and don't have to ask, "Excuse me, what?" 3 times. I can talk to my family and friends in public when there are other people within hearing range most of the time. Sometimes not. I've been able to talk to my favorite band at a concert and to give my favorite YouTuber a gift at a book fair, but sometimes I pretend I can't understand German, my native language, or that I can physically not speak when a stranger approaches me to ask for directions. Sometimes I make YouTube videos where I talk about selective mutism. Sometimes I cannot talk even if there is no one there to hear it. I could go on, but I'm ending this here. If you are looking for an inspirational video about overcoming selective mutism with the one true way to do it, I'm sorry to have disappointed you, but maybe you're watching because you are currently in a place with your selective mutism where I have been too in the past, and this video can show you it doesn't have to stay that way forever, even if it seems that way right now. My story isn't over yet. I haven't left selective mutism behind me, but maybe exactly that can be helpful. Maybe my story can help someone understand the primary goal doesn't have to be I will be completely free of selective mutism, because that can seem scary and impossible to achieve, but I can do this at my own pace, one day at a time, and slowly things will get easier, and I won't have to feel this way forever. I will now disappear for another year, if I can even find any new video ideas for next year at this point. I'll see you next October. Until then, stay strong.